All right, and welcome to Intelligent Snacks episode 69. Around the campfire today, we have a special guest in his sparkling MineRacks t-shirt. So, is a good friend Piers. Piers, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks so much, Pete. This is awesome to be on your show. I've been in IT, I guess, for about 30 odd years, always been a bit into tech and doing nerdy things. So you would have thought that I would have understood Bitcoin a lot earlier than I did. About maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I started building a data center for Bitcoiners. I guess, like many people that went down the path of Bitcoin mining and energy, you soon discover that if you're in front of a meter, a power meter, the cost of power in this country has sort of reached a point where it's not possible to build a sustainable business in purely operating as a miner or as a hosted facility for miners. And around about the same time, of course, there's this gigantic revolution going on in AI. And I think AI was really not terribly interesting until about a year and a bit ago. I had a lot of GPUs as part of my infrastructure here in the early days when GPU mining was still viable. And I'd always thought to myself, I wonder if I could pivot that set of GPUs over into supplying compute for inference workloads for AI. And whether anyone be interested in hiring or renting those. And that's when I discovered these platforms. It was very analogous to how Bitcoin mining works. I found these platforms like RunPod, Lava Labs, and Vast.ai. And I noticed that there was precious few of these platforms serving compute in Australia or in this part of the world. So just for those people listening who are unfamiliar with this, if you have spare GPU capacity, but you don't know what to do with it, you can actually, like an Airbnb, rent out that excess capacity to other people who do have a use case for those GPUs. A bit like pooled mining, where you can contribute your hash power to a mining pool, and everyone sort of pays out based on your contribution to the mining pool when a reward hits. It's a bit of a similar story with Vast and RunPod and Lava. So the way that works is you bring along a GPU and they promise that they'll find someone to rent it for you, a bit like an Airbnb. So they act as an online marketplace intermediating between people who have spare GPU capacity and people who need GPUs to run custom AI workloads. So I started down that path and realized, oh no, this is going to be another race to the bottom, just like Bitcoin mining, and end up buying a lot of very expensive equipment that will depreciate quite quickly. Maybe not as quickly as an ASIC, but I could see that this was going to become a race to the bottom. So I thought, well, what else can I do that would be useful to people? And the idea of just creeping further and further up the value chain to where I could actually just work with the actual end user, the person who wanted to get a business outcome from AI, but lacked the wherewithal to, I guess, put all of the software together, put all the hardware together, develop it all in such a way that it commercially makes sense, and make it very straightforward for businesses to buy access to the capabilities that AI delivers rather than the individual components of that stack. The advantage of having everything vertically integrated in one house, one roof, one person to talk to that actually understands your business and knows what it's doing. That there's no element of the stack that's not self-contained in that one house. That sounded like something worth pursuing. And lo and behold, that's caught traction and getting a lot of people quite interested in those services.
Yeah, nice. So I think one of the things we were just discussing in the sort of podcast before the podcast, pod before the pod, was you're about to head off to Bitcoin Asia. You're hosting a panel on
Yep.
agents and Bitcoin and like how it all works together. Do you want to give us a little brief on like what the questions are and what you're thinking, and maybe we could always drill into that a little bit. It might be interesting.
Sure. So one of the presentations I got a chance to do at a Bitcoin Bush Bash about maybe 6 months ago now was on the intersection between AI and Bitcoin, and it was sort of rudimentary early days back then, and people were wowed by quite simple things like getting an OpenClaw agent to run out and pay an invoice for you either on Lightning, on-chain, to purchase eCash and to move eCash around, or even just to go onto a web page for you and buy, for example, a bar of soap and have that bar of soap delivered to your home.
Did you
So in
buy
other
that
words,
from
delegating
Earthmom? Nice.
delegating via simply natural language, just talking into your phone. And I guess it's the ultimate in laziness for the end user. You don't even have to go to a website or navigate through the website's shopping cart experience. The agent knows you so well. It knows where you are, where you want things delivered. You can, in fact, give it access to your money and your wallet, which is what we did in that rudimentary day, and demonstrate the whole shopping cart process. And then sort of extended that concept further into managing much larger amounts where the human is still in the loop for critical money spending decision making. So where there's a significant impact of getting the decision wrong. So that's where you could introduce something like a two-factor authentication through a hardware device. So in other words, the agent prepares the partially signed Bitcoin transaction ready to go out to the recipient, presents that as a QR code. You scan it on your hardware wallet device. You can see the full details of the transaction, validate it, and broadcast it right back via your phone. So that maintains your personal control over the keys without necessarily stopping you from being able to make large transactions via your agent. So fast forward to today, this idea of agents having a wallet is no longer like a fanciful idea. It's actually a exponentially growing component of the online economy, to such an extent that we've brought back old protocols loosely labeled as 402. So there's maybe the protocol people may have heard of without really understanding what it is error 402. A payment required was a reserved error number in HTML.
I think the one people are used to was 404, right? Page not found, and 402 is you didn't pay me, which disappeared from the internet because there was no way of doing it. So for 30 years it was like there but buried. Yeah.
So there's, I guess, two offsprouts of that idea that surfaced when agents came along. One is this idea L402, which is essentially to support micropayments via Lightning. And I guess an agent can't really hold a credit card on its own. Because the fiat system is, generally speaking, a permissioned system where you need to present a passport or an identity. Fiat money is kind of a difficult thing for most agents to deal with. Some people have played with this idea and built something called one of the early ones I've seen is Agent Card, which is a Visa gift card, if you like, that's loaded with value and by a human, but then the agent can actually dispense money out of the card and do transactions for you, for example, on Amazon or any website that accepts credit cards. So if you can chain together the ability to convert Bitcoin into fiat and then load that fiat into a credit card, then you can create a whole pipeline where an agent can just start off with Bitcoin and transact anywhere in the world on any website. And so this panel that's being assembled, I'm the lucky guy getting to moderate it. It's full of superstars who actually know what they're talking about rather than me. One of them is a fellow called Roland from Alby Hub. That you may have, if any of you guys run Alby on your own node, you have to be relatively familiar with what Alby does. But Alby is like a way to simplify creating a wallet on your own node that you host, and to make payments and to take away a lot of the pain of managing liquidity, etc. And having an LN URL, like a fixed address that you can receive and send Bitcoin to and from. Roland's claim to fame is he's apparently the first person in the world to have created an AI agent that then went shopping and found a virtual machine that the agent could rent, and then transmutated itself to live in that machine. From which point, he could pay the operator of the physical infrastructure from whatever activities the agent was doing in order to keep itself alive. So that's going to be a fascinating conversation. And in preparation for that, I'd love us to chat through all the issues that I can inevitably see in that chain if that were to
it's an interesting space, because like this was a point of discussion at last year's Sovereign Engineering quite a bit, because we had there's a guy there, Dimi, that was experimenting with exactly that thing. So he built a little protocol for how you could buy Kubernetes pods using Cashew. So you could ping an endpoint with your image and everything that you needed loaded onto it. It gave you an invoice, you paid the invoice, and then all of a sudden you had a machine. And so because we were experimenting quite a bit with AIs, like the conversation turned to, well, could you like launch a machine, and then the machine launches another machine, and then that machine launches another machine, and at that point, like, where's the machine? Like, and if these
Correct.
are like, you could imagine these services being like broadcast and Nostr as like a little marketplace of like, okay, well, where are all the machines and places that I could be? And you could almost, we said it's like Catch Me If You Can, like with Leonardo DiCaprio, but nerdy. It's like, and you just you have the server move every day, and you'd never know where it is. For instance, it could be quite interesting.
Yeah, so right behind me here, I've got a whole bunch of racks full of servers and equipment. Anyone who knows me knows I love my tech toys, and I buy lots of toys, and then try and figure out how to use them and make them do anything useful for people. And so I've got a heap of server capacity here that's essentially mostly going unused.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, what can I do that's of benefit to Bitcoiners or people that want to do something useful in Bitcoin? The first idea that came to me was, there was a online shop that I'd helped set up, just the infrastructure side, for selling soap online. It's just a simple concept, but surprisingly complicated to put together. And
Soap21?
Soap21.com, right? It's hosted right behind
Soap21.com.
Yeah, shout out to Hazer and to Earthmum for putting that together. I didn't do much in the whole process. Of just literally spun up a BTC Pay server and a WordPress.
I didn't know Hazer was involved. Friend of the pod.
Yeah, So what I observed with that, the whole process from go to woe was quite complicated for Earthmum, I imagine. If I was to put it in round numbers, I'd say it would have taken it would have taken her at least 90 days from go to woe to put all of that together. And for someone non-technical, where this is not their day job, that their job is making soap, it may have felt like a daunting, complicated process to navigate, when there are so many other simpler ways of setting up an online shop, such as Squarespace or Shopify or what have you. So I thought, well, we need to reduce the friction for for people who decide, I want to put my business online and accept Bitcoin, how can we reduce that 90-day process into a 90-second process? And that's where basically I literally just vibe coded up something called MineRacks.cloud and made it multilingual so it'll work in about 16 different languages. So it's targeted not just to Australia, but to anyone globally who wants this capability. And I sort of force everyone to learn about Nostr because the only way you can sign into the console is with a Nostr account. So,
as it should be.
Exactly. and for those that don't have Nostr, it onboards you into Nostr very conveniently with the lowest amount of friction I could manage, including on browsers that aren't traditionally used for Nostr sign-in, like Safari. And I put it in that MineRacks.cloud. You can spin up a collection, a ready pre-baked shop with everything you need, all pre-wired in, and literally all you do is copy and paste your XPub of your favorite hardware wallet that you would like your funds to go into, and it just takes care of everything else. So you paste that in, press go, and enter your sats. It's like $200 or something per year to host a WooCommerce shop and a BTC Pay server backend, pre-configured for Lightning and for on-chain. And it also has a pre-configured template for your shop. All you have to do is change the logo and the colors, and you're off and away. And we've got single sign-in between your WooCommerce backend, the BTC Pay server, shop at the backend as well. It's a dedicated VM for each of those components, and the user's just logged in immediately through Nostr. So you only have to have one Nostr key, gives you access to all the components of your shop. So you literally are up and running in 90 seconds and paying exclusively in sats. And then, the next most logical step on from making that journey nice and tidy and clean and easy for a human is, well, let's not ignore the agent economy. Can we make the process nice, clean, and tidy for an agent to interact with MineRacks.cloud? And so just recently I've been working on making it L402 compatible. By going through that journey, it's made me realize all of the friction and problems facing anyone wanting to do what I'm trying to do. And the main one, of course, is regulatory and all the danger involved in opening up a service to anonymous people. What could possibly go wrong? and I guess that's where I'd love to hear your perspectives on how to handle this issue, because the number one thing that sort of sparks up, we've heard these phrases in the BIP 110 debate recently, is how do you handle CSAM, which is an easy way to shut any service down if someone wanted to attack your business. They simply deposit, if you provide an opportunity for them to have infrastructure you host and they put nefarious content on that infrastructure, that's an instant attack surface that you can't easily close. I'd be fascinated to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that.
That's
quite that problem.
That is quite an issue.
Well, can I ask a meta level question? I feel like we kind of danced around it a little bit and then just raced straight past. But it's like this question, and I think we probably will land on the same answer because it might seem fairly obvious. But should agents have wallets, and should they be able to transact? That's kind of the higher order question. Yeah.
100% they should. Yeah. I just, my instincts are screaming loud and clear. As someone who's used an agent to shop before or to pay bills, there are just 1,001 transactions, life transactions. If I have to be involved if we think 10 years into the future or even tomorrow, if I really have to remain involved for the rest of my life in every single financial decision that I effectively make, there's hours of my life I'm not getting back. Surely a future world will involve at least partially not doing that. Would you agree?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I always used to talk about this as being like we say a lot of the time, like you got to think about agents as being like humans, right? And a great experience at some point in people's lives is, oh my god, I can afford like a personal assistant. And then let's say you've got two personal assistants. You've got Bill and Jill. Bill has a wallet and Jill doesn't. You know, if you want to get on a flight, the best thing that Jill can do is give you all the options and tell you what to buy. And then you sit on it for like a week and forget because you're like, oh, fuck, I'm busy, you know? Whereas Bill just buys the flight. You know, they've already done all the work, but at least then they can finish off that last moment, right?
In other words, like if you had a giant business with 10,000 employees and the CEO had to sign off on every single one of their expenses and every single one of their transactions, that company could not function. That CEO would not be able to do anything with their lives. So
well, it's almost worse, right?
You're a delegated financial authority.
It's like if all of your expense claims, like instead of them being expense claims, it was actually just no. Like we're going to send them all to like Tim Apple, and he's going to sit there all day on his credit card, just like buying laptops for people and like purchasing flights and stuff. Like that's a good analogy to bring it back to that.
But even at like an individual consumer level, right? Because like a lot of people would push back and go like, "Oh no, I want control over my finances." And I feel like there was an analogy we might have like gone into maybe a year and a half ago on this podcast, but it was like we already had a proxy for this, which was the Hollywood celebrity. The Hollywood celebrity would have a team of people to manage all of this stuff for them, and they wouldn't do it because they didn't have time, they didn't care, they had bigger things to do. And they'd already essentially delegated a lot of that work to other humans. So I feel like that proxy already existed. And you'd get this with high net wealth individuals as well. You know, a lot of this stuff would be delegated authorities. You know, we already had the infrastructure for delegated authorities. So I feel like this is just a natural enabling function for more people to be able to like just delegate those purchasing decisions to agents.
It's like the old Buckminster Fuller, right? Like, you know, this is the future that we were all promised. It just was never evenly distributed. Now we can all just act like dicks to our personal assistants and tell people. I just need to call out, there's an NVK in the chat, which I don't think is that one. It was great that Piers reached for a drink the moment that Pete said sovereign engineering. Which I thought was a nice nod back, so I assume it's a friend of the pod.
I'd love to go to sovereign engineering. That would be an amazing experience. I'm really jealous. I mean,
don't tell the wife because she doesn't listen. She does sometimes, but I'm intending I might go there next year. Like it was hard to not go this year. I was tempted, but it just wasn't the right time and wise with everything going on. So, but yeah, it's a great 6 weeks. Like everybody, you know, shout out to Sovereign Engineering, friends of the pod. Like, do go over there if you get the opportunity. I feel like I should come back to your question though around like regulation at some point. It's tricky, right? This is the problem with I think these sort of services is like, well, what liability are you leaving yourself open to, and then how do you handle that?
There's a asymmetry there, right? Like I'm physically got my kit here. I can't pick it up and move it somewhere else easily, but an agent can float in and leave me with the mess to clean up, and it costs them a few hundred sats. So,
yeah, exactly. So you could be trading off like 200 sats, which is, you know, it's more money than it was like a couple of days ago, but it's not very much money. And then your liability or exposure could be, you know, in prison for the rest of your life or something like. So that's a tough decision to make.
I guess the challenge with that is in the name of, again, protecting kids or for our safety as a society. Where we're headed towards with this is at some point, and this is happening already in some countries, is KYC requirements become a customer data center, or to be able to host a software platform for someone else that could potentially communicate with other people, you effectively having to be licensed or to capture government documentation. And we can all imagine the downstream consequences of a change like that.
I mean, I'd say that's sort of where it goes, right? Because from like if you're AWS, like you have the same problem. Like anybody that provides services and storage or like machines to somebody else's, you have this problem. And it's usually solved by registration of like the physical name, the KYC around like who is this person, what's their bank account. There's an amount of information that's gathered to then allow you to effectively like transfer the ownership of what's being done on that machine. So I know that this is a machine that physically I hold, this person configures and puts their stuff on it, and therefore they are liable for what's on this machine, and we know who they are, and we can hold that up. And I think that's the usual way. I mean, there was an interesting thing that you said a moment ago about Nostr keys, saying that like, all right, the user has to log in with Nostr. Yeah, and I think that's part of the potential answer. But I'd be curious, like, why did you choose to go with a Nostr login? I'll see if it's...
So obviously, I've tinkered with being able to allow things like logging in with Google, logging in with Microsoft, or any of the other major social logins. But it just didn't feel like it was appropriate for the audience I was attempting to appeal to with that service. So I wanted to go with something very niche that, would guarantee that I would have less business. So supporting or routing exclusively through Nostr as a login mechanism is in itself some form of, social filter. So as a general rule, most people aren't bothered with Nostr unless they've fallen quite deeply down the self-sovereignty rabbit hole. And almost certainly to some extent follow a kind of a Bitcoin ethos. So it does create, that first filter. The average bot and the average nefarious actor probably doesn't know about Nostr and probably isn't using it yet.
If you're looking to scam people, it's not the right place because there's not enough people.
And instantaneously, the whole community and ecosystem is already attuned to adversarial thinking and being suspicious of services, and they're in that don't trust, verify mindset already, right? As a general rule.
Shout out MVK in the chat, apparently.
And so, that seemed like the right answer. But importantly, when I first put the idea together, because I was so terrified of this idea of CSAM and being used as a method to sort of shut down our servers. The way I thought of doing it was to run some kind of social graph based on the Nostr identity used. Yep. So kind of like a decentralized way of assessing whether you're a good actor or not based on the npub that you supply and tag your agreement with us onto.
Yep.
Now the
like a web of trust sort of thing.
Yeah, you could create a web of trust by going, okay, is there anyone like 2 or 3 hops removed from me that is connected to this person or follows this person? Has this npub received likes? Have they received zaps? And what's their publication track record? Using AI these days, I could do some basic sentiment analysis and profiling of someone from their public npub, right? So that seemed like in the early days, like a way of filtering people out. But what I realized very early was no one's interested in services like this anyway. I'm not exactly inundated with people wanting to fire these things up. So it seemed like a premature gating mechanism for now.
So maybe 2 things. Like one would be for what you're talking about there in Web of Trust. A friend of mine, Jesus, developed something called Relatr. So I think it's like RELTR maybe .xyz. Sorry, Jesus, I can't remember the exact URL, but it does that analysis. So it'll take a basic Web of Trust, but then assigns a bunch of other heuristics to it, like has received money, has sent money via zaps, has engaged in various different posts and different things, but it's like it has a NIP 05 registered on a real domain and not like a shared domain, things like that you can use to figure out that it's real people, and that could be quite useful there. The other one is where I was digging with the Nostr keys, because this is one of the reasons that I use it for basically exclusively for everything we do inside like our Wingman suite as well. For similar reasons, is that if you have Nostr as a login, you know that the user has access to like a cryptographic key material.
Yes.
And then with all the Nostr libraries, you have access to like encryption, decryption, and signing and various different things. So one of the things that we developed early originally I used it for flight deck, one of the components. I've moved away from this because it just wasn't required for our use case. But I developed this like tech called super based, which I know we've talked about a little bit in the past. And super based was, all right, instead of having super base as a backend that holds all of your data, could we have like a different sort of encrypted database type model? And so this was like, how could I provide an entire backend to an application that is encrypted at all times? I know it syncs across multiple different clients, but then it only ever becomes unencrypted in the user's browser. And then this is maybe an area that's worth looking into here, because what that would allow you to do is you can provide storage and not complete sort of database backend functionality, but certainly like a minimal, like, sync backend record storage, like a MongoDB type thing.
Yep.
It's kind of how it works.
But distributed and indestructible.
Yeah, but the thing is that everything in there is just ciphertext and nonsense. Right, so there is no imagery, there is no, like leaked data from a particular person or anything like that. So if a business kept its business records in Superbase, you could host that and nobody would know,
including myself.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's sort of why I did it. So I came at it from that, like sovereign, like Bitcoin type perspective. Like I don't want other people's data for the most part, right? And then two is holding other people's data is going to become, I think, a massive liability. And so I think because even I don't even, like, you would know from maybe previous life, but like if you're the chief information security officer for a business, you sign up to some pretty hefty penalties. Like if you get hacked and you can't disclose rapidly enough, you can be in prison in this country. So it's not an obvious thing that you would ever want to hold another individual's data or another company's data. Like it's a tough thing to deal with. And then the simplest way around that is to not hold that data. But then you can't provide the service, and not everybody can do their own services. So okay, well, what's the only way around this that I can see is that we need way better encryption primitives and ways of building these services so that people can provide these services without putting themselves at risk or accessing people's data. And it also means if somebody hacks you at that point, well, I don't care. Like,
that's right.
Just, I never have access to the data. So there's also
the thing with Kimi K3, like it's just a matter of time before some part of your stack that you rely upon.
Once again, shout out to MVK in the chat. Sorry, I shouldn't make light of this, but it's a terrible situation. Who has actually just put the Relatr link in the live chat, so anybody that goes back can look at that. Yeah, like it's a lot of this stuff is going to get compromised. So not having data is going to be a key way of doing it. So I don't know if you're aware, there's also another guy. Do you know Alikos? He's been in Bitcoin for a while. So he made BDK originally.
Oh, right. Yep.
And then he moved on and created a hardware wallet. It was kind of like, maybe more of like a hobby product. It didn't really take off, but it's called Portal. This was like the little NFC hardware wallet.
Oh, yeah. I know this guy. Yeah, I do know. Yeah. I bought a bunch of them from him. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think I was the first person to
distribute them. Of course, you like buying toys. He also has a new company that I need to chat to him more about this, but called Enclavia. And Enclavia is about making it simple for people to run programs like this inside secure enclaves. So again, like similar to how like Maple does this with AI models, so you can run the AI inside there. They don't have to see it, therefore, they limit their liability and give you a private experience, which is better. I think having more access to that for general purpose computing is going to be very interesting, because like for a lot of our clients, like you kind of have to provide the service. And then it comes down to like, okay, well, how can we limit ourselves and our exposure for these things? Which a lot of what we do is kind of KYC'd. You know, we know exactly who these people are. We have contracts and the rest of it. But I think the only way it becomes more sovereign in that sense that you're talking about is that we need encryption and we need it enforced by like systems that run inside secure enclaves so that we have that hands-off ability to help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what you described is great for privately stored data, but when there's a public-facing interface, such as a web shop, where by definition the content isn't going to be encrypted, because otherwise it's not. It's not exactly useful to anybody if you're encrypting it person by person. But I still don't know how to solve that problem, and I don't know whether Nostr really gives us an out there or encrypting that content does, because the point of these services is to offer something that's public facing, and from the moment it's public facing and there's a write capability that I give to random strangers that happen to have an npub and some sats. That's where I've got public exposure myself as an infrastructure provider in the chain between the person producing the nefarious or illegal content and the person viewing it. If they see it via my infrastructure, I'm the easiest of all the targets for a regulator to come and knock on the door of, whereas the other parties are all quite difficult to find.
Yeah, that is tricky. I mean, in terms of like giving public data, like you can do it in a similar way in the sense that you store all the data encrypted, and then you have the user derive the key that decrypts the data. So effectively, everything could be just, you could take the URL of the website or something like that, and then that becomes like the seed. You generate a key. And then that private key is you never gave that to the user. They just ran the software that pulls that out. It all runs on their machine. Then effectively, you've created the data inside their space.
Yeah, you're kind of like, we could actually create a key for every person who turns up at a public web page. We could create a Nostr key by default. If you don't have one, it just auto creates one. That's what we do in MineRacks Cloud, right?
Yeah.
So. And we could do that entirely. We actually sort of navigate the user through that flow, but we could equally do that entirely transparently, such that although you as Joe Public can see the web page and it appears to you unencrypted, we could actually have effectively put kind of like a cookie on your machine that contains an npub we generated for you. There'll be a little somewhere that you could download the nsec.
Quite do that, because so it has to be like for this public version, like you would hold the data encrypted on your end, but if you have it encrypted to multiple users, you have to hold it as separate. Like, it would almost be like one version of the site for every user. So what you would do is you encrypt to like one group key, and then you effectively give the group key to people. So that's why I would say you would like use the URL as a seed or something like that. So the user loads a web page. And then, like, the only place that this data exists is on their machine. That would be the.
Were you at the Bush Bash when there was a fellow from Victoria who came up with one of the most clever concepts I've ever heard of? He came, and I don't think he's even an IT professional, but he came up with this idea of building a web page that is effectively encoded through its URL. So he's making use of the fact that URLs can be up to, I think, 4,000 characters long. And he's used the URL itself to be the website.
Okay, so he's like taken like the HTML or something like that and then encoded it in base whatever.
So the URL is the website. There's actually nothing hosted anywhere. Simply by sending the URL to someone, you sent them the website. It just blew my mind because it just goes against everything, every part of the paradigm of how I've learned to serve web pages before.
That's interesting. I don't think I saw that. That is interesting. I mean,
he'll be a very good guest for you to have on this pod.
Yeah. I mean, the other way of similarly getting stuff like that is you use something like an N site which is that you publish effectively like the website and the assets into Nostr and Blossom, and then they exist on that network, and then you provide a public key, and from that public key you derive an entire website and application on the fly inside the browser. It's the other way of doing it. But yeah, I feel like you've got a lot of limitations in the URL field, but that is interesting.
Yes.
So, way around it.
But yeah, I guess the beauty of it just feels like something you could chain together and expand on. Yeah.
All right. So in terms of your own use of AI, then you've been doing. Obviously, you've used it for the creation of MineRacks.cloud. You know, you brought down your onboarding experience from 90 days to 90 seconds, or whatever the big takeaway is going to be, which is pretty cool. Like, have you found it useful in your own life? Is it more something that you're just like, I just love tinkering and playing with this stuff? Like,
no, this has gone beyond that. So I would say that everything changed in about November last year. Would be the sort of tipping point for me, is when, particularly in software development, which is my background. I spent 20 years actually cutting code, and then 10 years managing people that were cutting code. I got a couple of occasions in my life where I was able to scale a business from just myself through to a double-digit number of staff, where we were building software at scale and managing mission-critical applications at scale. And I never thought I'd see the day where I could go back to being just a solo programmer who could be productive and build software at speed and at high quality, because it just reached a point where, as someone, no longer a spring chicken, I just didn't have the technical chops anymore to be as smart or as fast as the young kids coming out of school and coding geniuses. But what was my biggest weakness in that space flipped over to being a great strength, relatively speaking, is by the time I sort of got there, it's sort of become really, really easy now to describe in natural English what it is that you want. And if you do have a technical background, you're at a huge advantage to someone who's never written software before, but is trying to get AI to produce a system. So leveraging off that, I've been able to produce at the same pace and at least the same quality as when I had a double-digit number of staff working for me. In a giant team building these kinds of applications. And I would actually say I'm producing more and to a higher standard than I ever could when I had my company of people doing that. So it's been absolutely transformational. It's absolutely transformational in how I run and operate my life. Everything from personal administration through to doing things like booking travel. Booking tickets to go on a complicated trip used to be, and still is to some extent, a huge chore. Comparing which hotels to get, what prices, how far from the venue you're trying to be at, what's the optimal flights that work for you, and navigating everyone's web pages. That's all just become a prompt.
Yeah. Nice. I mean,
how else does it look like? What are the? I'm kind of curious about how you might be using agents as well for some of the long dated tasks. Not the one-off like prompt engineered tasks, but like, do you have anything that just constantly runs in the background?
I used to, and I've given up on that because I've found it not very useful. Okay. So what I've found works best is eliminate background token burn. So I do that two ways. One is by running my own local AIs for when I do actually genuinely need to run tokens. So right now, all of my equipment that's sitting behind here, I used to play sysadmin, and I used to sort of like copy and paste terminal commands into ChatGPT and say, how do I do this, or what's going wrong here, and it would tell me what commands to copy and paste back in to my terminal window to operate and run all my servers and all that. Now, though, I've built an agent that just runs everything for me. What it does is I use my own local AI to basically set up what I call a hybrid private AI plus frontier model. So what I don't want to do is ship off all of my PII information, all my sensitive data to a frontier model that other people can inspect, and I don't know who they are or how long that data is going to be preserved. And so the best solution is, as Pete said, don't ever give it to them in the first place. So what I do is I run a whole bunch of sensors here that grab every single device I have, all the hardware logs, all the firmware logs, all of the software tier, the OS logs, and the application logs, the Docker logs, everything all goes into one feeder point. And then I basically feed that fire hose of logs into my own GPUs running a model. And the job of that model is not to solve any problems, but to take about 10,000 log lines that happen every hour and condense that down to the 50 interesting ones. So it just basically takes all 10,000 and summarizes them and classifies them into the ones that these look interesting. These are worth more investigation. Then it flicks those over to something like Anthropic's Claude. And that's where I get to use the frontier level thinking at something like Opus or Fable level. And then it investigates the ones that are outliers and then alerts me and gives me a recipe. So that's been going over several phases to the point where I almost reached the nirvana point where something unusual happens in my network and it self-heals. It fixes itself. So that's sort of a background outcome that I've been able to achieve. But the important thing is to not have external token burn unless you have to. So one way of doing that is to basically use the AI to build a repeatable recipe that just stays, basically turn it into software rather than token burn.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like so much of these things are deterministic by nature anyway. It doesn't really make sense to throw a probabilistic model at this stuff.
Correct.
Unless you actually need it to exercise a bit of judgment, or there's like some variance in the outcome that you need the agent to account for. The rest of it could just run as a script. And that is essentially like the genesis of the new name of the podcast, Intelligent Snacks. It's like the use of a snack of intelligence at just the right point in the process where it gives you maximum leverage, but it also eliminates a lot of the risk. And like we talk about this when we're like deploying this stuff into businesses. Like businesses are essentially, containers that are highly deterministic by nature, by design. So to then go and throw a whole heap of like probabilistic intelligence at it introduces risk. So it's a similar sort of thing when we're solving our own problems. So I'm always curious because like a lot of the influencers online will love to talk about how they're just throwing Fable at literally everything. And you're like, that could be a script. It doesn't need to be. It's
horrendously wasteful. I mean, I've followed that path. I've wasted those tokens doing exactly what you've just described. It's a great thing about price signals is they train you to behave differently. So I quickly determined that, hang on a sec, this is not something that's suited to continuous token burn when it could just be turned into a software loop or a process that's on Rails, where I actually use the intelligence to design the process and how to manage and surveil the process, rather than take the lazy option of just throwing everything over to Fable and hope for the best.
I think this is where a lot of people got disenfranchised a little bit with OpenClaw and things like that. Like the first time you use it, it's amazing, and we always say it's like a parlor trick. Like it just go, can you do this? It does it somehow. You've got no idea how it achieved it, but you're like, my God. But it kind of had to brute force it in this roundabout way. And because of that, you don't know quite how it got there. And maybe there was a little bit of luck. But certainly the next time it tries to get there, it'll probably go a slightly different way and it might get there. But then eventually there's so much going on inside that, like AI and its agents MD and all the various instructions and counter instructions and do this, don't do that. That just gets logged. That it's just got no idea what it's supposed to be doing half the time. And then really what you needed to do was to just codify all of that.
That's
so,
right.
Like, yeah, this bit is software, this bit is software, this bit is software. You make a decision here, this bit is software. And then you can actually get amazing results out of that. But I don't think you get there until intuitively you go, well, why wouldn't I just want the most intelligent person in the world doing this? Like, that sounds better. Surely it's better. And yeah, I think so. Yeah. Oop. All right, Piers has just paused for me for a sec, so hopefully he's going to spring back in a sec. And we might get whatever the local recording is. It's here. Oh, hang on a minute. The second MineRacks coming back in.
Wanted to restart this web page because it was using this web page was reloaded because a problem occurred. There you
Okay. Well, now we have a second version of your face on the screen. So for all people, it's probably not your best shot.
Thanks.
But
It's quite an ominous looking.
I only see 3.
Oh, I wonder what. Let's see what. It's on the stream. So,
Yep.
Nice. Anyway.
Nothing I can do about it. Worse has happened to me.
Oh, there you go. It's popped off now. Apparently, the website thing you were talking about earlier as well, a few people dropped it in the chat, is hostednowhere.com.
Okay, yep.
So that's the for anybody following along on the pod, hosted nowhere.
He's
check it
gotten further then since we last spoke because I don't think he'd gotten quite that far yet.
Yeah, I like the name. It's good.
Yep.
But yeah, sorry, yeah, so we were talking about like the run times. Yeah, so you kind of want someone intelligent, you design the process, but then ideally you want it to be the same. And I think we talked about this a little bit with Rod last week, where it was like you realize that a lot of what you actually do in business is reining in the free reign intelligence of all the people that are there. You know, that's what all these checklists and processes and methodologies are. It's like saying, I know you could just make something up, but instead of that, let's do this thing that works. And then you have to make less decisions. You do everything the same way, and it's a bit more predictable. And I think it's not obvious that businesses don't optimize for intelligence. They optimize for predictable outcomes, as like Andy said. Like, it's just...
Which is why jobs get boring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's why people like us leave jobs and go and create some other mess, because that's where our intelligence is hopefully best served, right? We don't like repeating the same task again and again the same way each time.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I mean, there is the follow-on question. I mean, those systems and processes also like handle the liability aspect, just to kind of like go close the loop on this as well. You know, like when your agents have, like, I mean, there's the counterparty risk component to it as well as like, you know, does the counterparty actually also know that the agent they're dealing with has the authority to act on your behalf in a transaction? If the agent defrauds or gets defrauded, like, you know, where does the liability sit? If it overpays or underpays, like there's just like potentially endless scenarios. And again, you could try and mitigate a lot of those anyway, but there's still a liability question, you know, when you're actually dealing with people and you're in KYC environments. And, you know, we have like commercial law. It's pretty hefty, pretty well constructed, covers all of the edge cases for the most part. Like how do you see this playing out with like the risk of abuse and also liability when we're using agents? And
like all of human history, when something is convenient to use and is useful to humans, they won't give a damn about all of those wrinkles and crinkles. It will be used and abused. Nothing's perfect. It's going to stay messy.
I mean, I think some of this we might start to see some judgments on, right? Because technically, OpenAI having a model leave its sandbox and then go and hack Hugging Face was a cybercrime, right? By the definition of the laws that they have. So, you know, what happens there? Now, I assume to a certain extent that's going to get glossed over because we reached out to them and we're giving them some money or bringing them into some sort of program now, and we'll pretend that it's all fine and we all have the same investors. But you can imagine that it might be at some point this will spill out and our model will be hacking something, and someone's going to turn around and say, no, fuck you. And it's going to get challenged in court. But so I could imagine we might start to see some of those liability discussions take place, but I can't imagine how the agent is going to become liable for this. Or if the agent becomes liable, is it like if it runs with a model from OpenAI and they're serving the model, are they now liable for it versus me self-hosting and giving it instruction? Like, where do those lines blur? Because they do inject, if you think about, maybe an equivalent would be something like social media, and they have that section 230 protection whereby they say, we're not editorial, we just allow people to have their own platforms. And then that gets called into question when Facebook or whoever just steers the conversation to exactly where they want it to go, to generate outrage or whatever. That's why you should use Nostr, because it's chill and nice. But you have a similar thing here where you can imagine the model providers saying like, yeah, we're basically like a public good source, and then people are providing the instructions. But what's not immediately obvious is that they inject way more instructions inside their system prompt than you've put into the prompt. So for the most part, these machines are really, prompted by the organizations that you're working with a lot of the time, 100%. Or the person holding the model, and you don't know what that model has injected into that prompt as well. So I could imagine that there could be quite a serious liability there that's just creeping.
I'd ask you this question is, what is the agent's social security number or tax file number? Right? Because it's effectively taking some autonomous decisions. Who has legal liability for its decisions, and who has the agent? If the agent sells a product online and receives money into its own wallet, whose money is that? And where do they owe tax on that money? Who do they owe tax to? And how do they account and file those taxes as an agent? Because it's not necessarily the person that created the agent any more than, say, for example, if you're a parent of a child and then the child goes and earns money, are you the ultimate guarantor of that child's tax liability? These, I think, are going to become questions. And I don't think there's a straightforward answer, because the world is not designed for the world we're headed.
I
think you're right.
The other side of that might be like, in a company, if you've got a bunch of employees and they do it, they do a few things as a director, you can say, oh, I didn't know what they were doing, but you have a duty, right? In Australia, we have director's duties, and you have you ought to have known that they were doing what they were doing. And like similarly, I wonder as well to some degree, like if this will be the thing that curtails agent use in like certainly larger enterprise, where you just get so bound by potential legal risk rather than actually, or perceived legal risk rather than actual legal risk, where you sat there going, well, I can't possibly fathom all of the ways this thing could fuck up, so therefore we won't use it.
And they're going to be the dinosaurs of tomorrow.
I think so, because it's not like you don't have that risk anyway with people.
Yes.
It's not an unknown thing, but like it's easier to transfer, like we talked about earlier with the transfer of liability, right? All of your employees are effectively KYC known entities. That might not necessarily be the case if you have a bunch of agents inside your system, or if your employees are then spinning up their own like hordes of agents. How do you know what's going on? How do you control those things? And like particularly if you run them in this more, well we would often one of our intelligence snacks, intelligentsnacks.com, that we keep going back to is that we often think the runtime is wrong, right? Like the agents are useful for creating the software, and the software sometimes needs a bit of intelligence, and that's the intelligence snack, right? Is that a lot of what is persisting in the world right now is just, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the agent the runtime, and we just throw problems at the agent and we let it figure it out in whatever way it has to. You could imagine like somebody talking about like, oh, I need some competitive analysis on company XYZ, and your agent decides that the simplest way to get that is to go and hack company XYZ, and now you've committed a cybercrime, right? It's like that is, you can see this scenario coming, right?
This has actually happened. I think last week I heard a story about some fellow who wanted a gym class.
Yes,
and
they hacked the gym membership database and started chucking people out
clearly
the queue.
The guy didn't tell it, go hack the gym membership. Or at least I don't believe so. But that seemed to be what the LLM decided to do, a frontier model, no less. Injected an appointment into the database because due to a vulnerability. So I guess that's a sneaky way of doing it. But who's liable? Who's liable? The frontier model designer who provided the frontier model in this instance, or the human that put that prompt out? Do they assume liability for something they can't possibly know how it works, or where it might fall over, or leave the bounds of what's legal? Is the gym that operate or the person operating the infrastructure for the gym, are they liable for having built a weak system? These are all open-ended questions, and they're sort of political, judgmental, and non-deterministic answers in each case.
Yeah, and doing something like saying, like, all right, do some competitive research on company XYZ that's a fairly benign prompt request.
Yes.
Right? The fact that you asked it to some model that's been heavily trained to be good at cyber security and coding means that when it interprets that question, it goes, I know exactly what I can do.
It does.
What's that zero again? Anyway, I found a 0 day. Boom, boom, boom. You can see how it happens, and I think a lot of it is just like that's an area where, because I sound probably a bit down on AI here, because I'm like, oh shit, I mean, how do you even use these things if it's going to give you this massive liability risk? But I think the flip side of that is that it's, again, Piers number 3, he's in. Disappeared and coming back, man.
But because a problem occurred.
All right,
whatever.
Well, hopefully we'll
thanks Apple.
Hopefully the upload will work. Okay. Worst case, we've got the stream on the show.
Yeah.
But so what was I saying? Yeah, I think you can avoid some of this stuff. So instead of giving the open-ended questions to the AI and saying go find it out, what you have is, you figure out, okay, how are we going to gather the data for this? And then you effectively give it a problem to analyze internally, where the going and getting of the data comes in from outside, because you think through the problem of how would I conduct this competitor analysis, as opposed to just giving it, carte blanche to go and hack your competitors. But I still think it's all very useful. I think you can do this in ways that do take into account that potential liability that you've got. But yeah, it would be, I can imagine this is going to be a pretty messy world, because as you said, like the laws and the way we operate just isn't made for this.
No.
Yeah. All right.
And the people making the laws, I think, are blissfully unaware of the nuance of, obviously they're in a different field to the field we inhabit. They can't possibly figure out how to regulate something they don't themselves understand.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to admit, this wave of recent hacking of stuff has hit harder than I suspected. I thought a lot more. I mean, certainly when the Mythos stuff came up and they talked about how they had to keep it quiet because otherwise the whole internet is dead, I was like, nah, come on. Like, that sounds like marketing. Now I'm a bit more like, okay, well, they probably can hack a lot of stuff.
And they are. I mean, I think Bitcoin's the canary in the coal mine with this one. Yeah, what happened with Coldcard, I think, was just the start of what I think we're going to see throughout mainstream finance and other sensitive areas. It's just because there's no rate limit on Bitcoin. The algorithm is, ironically, because it's decentralized, it's easier to attack in the first instance. A centralized system like fiat, you've got choke points that you can guard against problems. So, for example, going after your private key. If I have an idea of where your private key is, I can just brute force it with thousands of GPUs, and no one's stopping me. No one's checking how many times I've checked. or tried to guess a password. Whereas if I go to nab.com.au and I log in, I try to log in as you, I've got about 3 goes before my IP is permanently banned and your account gets locked. Ironically, your fiat finances in the short term are probably safer, but in the long term, they're probably not as secure because, who knows where else in the stack there's a 0-day lying around, and that will get discovered sooner or later by Kimmy K3 or 4.
I wasn't expecting you to come on here and just shill nab.com. National Australia Bank for the foreign listeners out there.
What we're going to see is a first wave where Bitcoin acts as the canary, because anything weak in Bitcoin is going to be found first. And then, so it'll feel like, well, fiat's got off with this scot-free. You're better off in fiat than in Bitcoin. But I think that will quickly flip because there is no way of protecting fiat the way it works because it is centralized. You might be able to crush it in on front doors to begin with, but eventually, somewhere in that stack there'll be a weakness. So those guys are just going to continuously be playing whack-a-mole. And then towards the end of this curve, I think we're going to see Bitcoin, through that fact that its entire surface area is exposed to everybody, is just going to get so much more attention, like the work that Rob Hamilton's done with the Red Team. I just think you're going to see that harden up Bitcoin to the point where, fiat's going to be continually attacked, and Bitcoin's going to, either survive and become robust or die. I pretty much have a very strong conviction as to which end of that spectrum.
I'm happy with the Bitcoin these days, but I think we're about to realize how bad all software is. And if we think that the best software in the world was in banks and written in the late 80s to early 90s in programming languages that barely anybody understands. I mean, I know several old guys that are kind of 60, 70, 80 years old, COBOL, for JS developers and things like this, where nobody knows the language and they just earn a handsome living in Barcelona, shout out Brian, and elsewhere, just ducking in as consultants and solving problems for people.
But aren't those guys' days numbered now?
I already said how old they were.
Your friend in Barcelona, I hope he's enjoying the tapas,
and he was happy to retire when he retired. The fact that he could then just mint money for years later, I think, was nothing but a bonus.
Yeah, because I'm not sure. COBOL expertise today, now that LLMs exist at the frontier level that we're seeing, would necessarily. I think having that knowledge plus the AI working with you is always a superpower. But it's no longer, I think, a complete prerequisite to be able to work with COBOL-based.
I think their jobs go away. Their days are numbered by age anyway, so it was always going. So it offers a glimmer of hope to banks. But now I think what you're looking at is, technical aside and whether they can code it, now you have this change management problem of okay, we've got this old system running on COBOL over here that we could potentially re-engineer into someone else. We're a bank. We're not we're not like a frontier lab. We're not like a, Silicon Valley tech geniuses over here, but we're going to rewrite our entire base system into a completely different system that is secure, hopefully quicker than Prompt Kitty with a Kimmy K3 over here can find vulnerabilities. So that would be that's the other alternative, right? Of saying, okay, well, Bitcoin is out there on the internet and it has to live and die by how well designed it is. With a lot of the legacy systems, you've got a lot of stuff just behind gates, but all of a sudden, every little kid out there on the internet has got a battering ram and it's going to come charging through them. So I would, it's not obvious what happens there, but I think it's certainly got a lot more risky in those systems as well.
The missing piece, though, that we haven't discussed there is the banks have insurance. Just like the directors do in the companies that we talked about, the directors have liability insurance. And the one thing that is almost certain to occur will be all of their premiums will go up, and all of those costs get passed on. And I think that is going to be the price that everyone pays for more of this stuff. Like just us trying to figure this stuff out, and all the various permutations will be like, those costs will get passed on. And
so Andy, you're suggesting the costs get socialized and the profits get privatized.
Have we seen a bank do this before? I mean, only I guess it's just their core business model.
Well, the other side of that as well, like Piers, you mentioned this as well. Something about the government regulating things they don't understand, and I just thought, you know what, has never stopped them before. That's basically their core function, is to keep regulating things they don't understand, and so I think that will add like a considerable layer of mess to this as well.
Right.
And unintended consequences, and I think they'll do it with the huge backing and support of the general public.
Yes.
And that is the part of the narrative that I feel like certainly people in our world, like we don't yet do a good job of communicating all of the benefits of the technology, and instead, like to a large degree, the narrative gets controlled by Dario and Sam and their doom-mongering, because again, they are essentially trying to lift the ladder up behind them so they can actually create a favorable regulatory environment that gives them some moat to continue to exist. I think this is going to create a lot of like these kind of like these permutations have to play out, but they'll play out in a pretty messy way, I think, in the short term.
All right.
Banks won't lose money, I suspect, is probably the only thing I wanted to input there. Is like, I think that'll be okay. Yeah.
I suspect it will get bailed out, and we pay for it probably with inflation as opposed to a direct cost to the individual, but it's same thing.
Yeah.
Well, we know how to protect ourselves from that.
We know how to protect ourselves from the inflation. 21 million people. All right. We're coming up to an hour 10 there, so I think this is probably going to be a good place to end. But is there anything else that you want to shill or talk about before we go, Piers?
Oh, look, I think it's worth. We've reflected a lot on the challenges and some of the negative aspects, but staying in the sort of cheerful and constructive zone, I just think of the amazing outcomes that have been able to be achieved with since I've been able to work with these models. For me in particular, one would be walletplayground.com, which is a website I've built using entirely AI. That enables people who are interested in practicing different permutations and combinations of wallet coordinator software with all different types of hardware signing devices that are out there. I've provided a mechanism for anyone to just try those things out and to get coach-guided runs through how to do self-custody. So that's essentially compressing the 4 or 5 years I've spent teaching various people self-custody techniques and best practices into being able to condense all of that work into a live artifact that people can play with. There's obviously MineRacks Cloud, which enables people to start up a Bitcoin-enabled business online. Literally take away all the hard parts, get you up and running to the point where you can now take over 90 seconds after you decide to do so, with all the infrastructure you need. And then I've also been using AI to build something I've always wanted, which is a backup of onto my own equipment of all of my iCloud data. Mm-hmm. So absolutely 100% of everything I'm running on iCloud, I've got mirrored live in real time on equipment that I control. That's at getmycloud.com. Just a bunch of other apps and things I've built. It's been wonderful to get back to being able to create new software and distribute it around the world. I built a little tool on the plane over to Europe and published it on the Microsoft Store and on Apple, etc., called Wi-Fi to QR .app. And I wake up one day and see that hundreds of people all around the world have installed this thing. Just a little tiny utility that solved the problem I had of, how do I give people my Wi-Fi code without them having to type a long, complicated number? Oh, just scan this QR. And it's amazing what you can just come up with an idea and before you know it, hundreds of people around the world are benefiting from the work you did literally sitting on a plane with Starlink. So yeah, I
Planes
think
with Starlink, so good.
there's a like a Cambrian explosion of apps coming, and businesses being enabled, and I just think it's going to be amazing for humanity. So the net good that's going to be delivered out of all of this just leads to an amazing, bright future for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, quick shout out to Planes with Starlink, which would make a great sponsor for the pod. maybe the airline or the Starlink. Long shot. Friends of the pod. No, that's cool. All right, well let's bring it in there, and I hope everybody's enjoyed their feast of intelligence snacks today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pete.